right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another webinar here at Route Consultant. If you haven't been here before, if you haven't seen one of these, my name is Josh Gregory. I am the Vice President of Education here at Route Consultant. So a lot of different things that touches, but really the goal of these webinars are to help give you an outline and an understanding of this industry and help you kind of decide if this is the right one for you or not. And if it is, we really want to help you accelerate that journey from here. So any questions that you have that come up during the day, we want to be here to answer them. And we want this to continue to be a place where you can come and learn about the space and figure out next steps from there. So if you do have questions, if you're here live and you have any questions, there is a Q&A button at the bottom. So you're free to type those in and ask those at any time, but we'll get to a Q&A section at the end. So just like I said, if you want those answered and addressed, put it in that Q&A button at the bottom of the window. Now, as we always do on these, we want to always come with some content and some understanding. So what we're really focused on today is analyzing really the details of the revenue model, so the top line. And we want to focus on that separately for each of the segments that we see in the waste industry to really help you understand the model as clearly as you can. Because if you understand the top line, the rest is really just driving efficiency in your expenses. So as we have in the past, we've again brought Tommy Turbeville back on to help with his decades of experience in the space, both operating and analyzing these businesses. So Tommy, why don't you go ahead and say hello to everyone?
Hey, folks. It's good to be back with you this afternoon.
Perfect. All right. Good to see you, Tommy. So as I said, really, I want to focus on the revenue side today. So and let's take it segment by segment. So I think the one that a lot of people think of. So let's start with residential, and specifically, can we start with the contracts with the city? So the municipal contracts. So for those who haven't heard of it before, can you just start by giving kind of a description of how those contracts are awarded and how often, just so people understand what the contracts with the city look like?
Yeah, glad to do that. So, yeah, municipalities, again, like water, electricity, things of that sort, they typically provide waste service for the residents of single family duplexes, things of that sort. And so when they do that, what they do is it's a competitive bid. And so there is a process they go through to actually bid those out. The terms are typically 3 to 5 years, and the way they are bid is per unit, meaning per individual household. One of the key ways they determine that is based on water meters. So you would bid a price per unit. Let's just say, to keep the math simple, $20, and there's 5,000 units. Then at the end of that month, you would bill them $100,000, one invoice for all of those, the households that you've been assigned. One of the things with that, what you will see is the larger cities that do that, they will sub out in zones. So they will give you a certain geographic area to offer a bid on. So they will have multiple contractors in a particular city. Where smaller cities, it's very, very common for them just to have one vendor.
Got it. So is that the only part of the contract is a per unit bid? Is there any other fees or anything associated with it?
No, really, it's just per unit. Here's what we project the number, here's the number of houses. You can validate it if you want. Here's how we're going to validate the houses. Typically, again, like I said, the most common is water meters, and you will give them a price per unit. And then, in the agreement, there's also, you want to make sure that there's opportunities to adjust that, because if you're moving into a town that everybody's exiting a big city and it's a smaller suburb, you want to make sure you're able to capture that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so what ways have you typically seen it? Have you seen it where maybe it's after a certain amount of time, there's an automatic adjustment of prices, or is it typically something where you have to go in and have some ability to do a full renegotiation? What does that look like?
Typically, the term of the agreements are 3 to 5 years. And in that, there is a annual increase. It's typically tied to a couple of things. The most common is just consumer price index. So you can typically that's an automatic. You just have to notify them. Here's what, according to the agreement, here's what it is. But you also have the opportunity, should something extraordinary happen, that you can go in and do that. And it could be from disposal cost or just, severe economic something of some sort happen. But typically it's an automatic annual increase, and most of those are tied to one piece of the CPI.
Got it. Now, I don't know how often this happens, but is it possible for a house to have multiple trash cans? Is that something they pay for or that you would provide? And in that scenario, would it count as two units or one?
Well, and typically in the agreement, it's going to tell you whether you're providing the cart and or whether the resident is providing it. Um, and typically, if you are providing the cart, there are limitations, one cart per household, things of that sort. If they provide them, you're going to get a little bit of everything.
Yeah. Yeah. So if it is provided by, by the house or by the city and it's not limited, you could end up with multiple at a house and you would still only get the payment for the one house, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Got it. And I know this is a much harder answer, but in general, how many houses can one truck service in a day? A general size truck.
Well, I mean, you get into some very automated residential. I mean, you can be in excess of 1,000 a day.
Got it. And I don't know if you were looking at these at all during COVID. I'm wondering, are there times where people are at home more often and there's more trash, maybe a holiday break like Christmas, that anything like that where there's any kind of change in the volume that you have to prepare for or the volume of trash that comes?
Yeah, of course, after Christmas is always more. The good thing is it only lasts a week.
Yeah,
It doesn't, everybody wants to get rid of it. And the other I will tell you is during the summer, the waste is a little heavier. There is a little more, primarily because kids are out of school.
yeah,
And so there's more people in the household throughout the entirety of the day when school is out than, the other 9 months of the year.
yeah. And I know we're focused on the revenue side, but I'm sure that has an impact on the expenses as well, since you have to pay an amount for the actual weight of the trash that comes in. So probably something to be thinking about in terms of your disposal cost.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, disposal is impacted some. It's not as big an impact on the residential. Again, I'm because it's not that heavy for the most part anyway.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. So that's residential tied to a municipality where there's a set contract, and so it's a lot more fixed. You kind of what you're getting into, a general feel for what kind of volume and revenue you can expect because it's set out in advance and you've got pretty consistent for a few years. Now I know that residential also has a side where sometimes you're working directly with houses. And when you're still doing that, is it still the same type of structure where it's just an amount that you charge them, just per unit? There's nothing different there, or how do you think about rates in those scenarios?
Yeah, rates there they are typically more. I mean, they could be as much as 70% more based on density and where it is. And plus, you're not guaranteed you're picking up. You go down the street and you're picking up every house. I mean, you can definitely work towards that. But on that, it's still a cost per unit. And the one difference there, because you're doing the invoicing, is it's very common for that invoicing to be quarterly and in advance. So at the beginning of each quarter, you would invoice for 3 months and keep down on some of your invoicing costs, but that's very common in the residential subscription side of the business.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense. And so, with a municipality, you're bidding. So it's often basically, you're trying to find what's the price level that's the lowest that'll beat out the other bidders and still be profitable. On this side where you're not in this bidding scenario necessarily, what do you kind of take into account to decide the rates that you're going to charge?
Yeah, I would say the big thing in the industry that you always want to look at is running a truck costs you so much money,
Yeah.
right? And so you're really going to understand what that a lot of it is looking at what revenue are you needing per hour to be profitable. And so when you look at it, you look at, okay, how long is it going to take me to get there and service? I mean, servicing part is minimal, but it's the travel time, not only to get there between stops and of course to get to the disposal site. And so you kind of figure all that in to help come in, you know, with the rate. And a whole lot of times you have to look at that to make sure you're maintaining your competitiveness, looking at what's the potential, where can you go based on the densities there, and price it based on that.
Is there a good way, if you're looking at an area, is there any good way to know how many potential competitors you would have in an area? Is there any way to see online how many different people are in a given area?
It is it's very tough. You know, most people nowadays, I mean, they just go out and Google, put in their city name, waste haulers, and you may get all of them and you may not, because again, there's a lot of guys out there that do it that do absolutely no advertising.
Yeah, got it. So it's something you'll kind of experience. And so if you're starting fresh, it's going to be very different than if you're acquiring an existing business where you know the territory they're operating in. And so
Yeah,
that's something to keep in mind if you're trying to target a specific area is it can be hard to know what the competitive structure looks like if you're trying to come in fresh without, because if you acquire a business, not only do you know the accounts that are already there, you also know you can talk with the existing seller and get their experience on what they know kind of the competitive landscape looks like in the surrounding areas and maybe where growth opportunities may lie.
yeah. I would say this: if you want to see all the competitors, regardless of area, go sit at the entrance to the landfill, to the disposal site.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Do any
that
of
that
those,
everybody is coming in, but they may not be in your specific area that you're servicing.
yeah, do any of those trucks have like phone numbers on the side or business information that that somebody could go out and kind of see, okay, hey, here's, I can come and call and talk to a couple of these people in the area and get a sense of what it's like for them.
I have done that many times.
Okay, got it. Yeah. Yeah, I know we've done that in a few of our other industries too, just to get a sense of things. So good to know that that's an option. You can go find your closest landfill. Um, Now, we talked about how to increase rates on the municipal contracts, where you basically have to typically have it as a part of your contracts and talk with the city about it. If it's on your own, how often do you see rate increases happen? And is there something you look for in your own business, a specific threshold or profitability where you decide to increase the rate? And the other side of it is it difficult to communicate those rate increases to clients, or do they generally just kind of accept it?
Uh, in this industry, it's well accepted. Annual increases are just accepted when nothing out of the ordinary is happening. It's also very common in the industry to have a fuel fee that's tacked on. Um, that's very common. So it gets tacked on to every invoice, whether it's municipal or whether it's an individual contract, to have that on there. But annual increases, again, if they're reasonable, most people just accept them and move on. It's those that have been a customer, especially if it's one of the large national haulers. If they just hadn't checked and they've been there for 10 years, their rates are probably going to be close to double what a new customer could call and get.
Yeah, because they've just had rate increases every year and not even paid attention to it.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, of course, if something outside of that time frame, there is a difference in the disposal cost, the tipping fees go up, then you can get it then as well.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we've hit it on residential. So let's talk about the next segment. So commercial, which hauling trash from mainly businesses and those dumpsters that you see behind businesses or business centers. So how do you find that that revenue model works similarly or differently to what we've talked about so far?
Well, when you're talking about dumpsters, the great thing about those as well, on the commercial side, is it's basically a monthly service fee as well. Um, and so it is, hey, but it does get more complex because you talk about different service frequencies. So residential, it's rare anything is outside of one time a week.
Yeah,
But when you get into the commercial, it could be once a week, up to 6 or 7 times a week. Seven is less common just because you don't have a place to dispose of it. But then the other aspect of that is you're always providing the container, and that container is of different sizes as well.
got it.
So again, so as you're looking at how would you price commercial, you would basically take out the disposal and the cost of the container and look at, okay, what's it going to cost me to service this? How long is it going to take? I mean, typically pulling in to pulling out, if it's a front end loader, it's about, 3 minutes, 3, 4 minutes. That's what it's going to take. But then you've got your travel time. And then for the container, for example, it is the different sizes, the cost. So you want to not only make sure you're covering that, but get a return of some sort because that's an investment you've made on the front end. And so if it's I'm just going to, a 4 yard container service once a week, that container cost you really only have to figure on the first service because the second service you're already capturing that cost. So what you will see is as the frequency per week increases, the cost does not automatically double.
Got
Hope
it.
that
So
makes sense.
yeah, in theory, your profitability can go up on the ones that are the more frequent servicings in a week.
Right. Yeah. So you service them, you have a larger container, or you increase the service level. I mean, the rates go up. It's based on that, and again, they're set. It's consistent. So somebody pays for this size container 3 times a week. Here's your monthly fee.
And what types of businesses do you see kind of have the highest frequency in a week?
I mean, you're going to see fast food restaurants. They are very common. Convenience stores now that are getting into serving food. You see those. Those are the ones that are, much more frequent. You have an office building. It's typically less frequent depending on the size. You have a small service company. They probably don't even get anything, office supplies or anything in, but once a week maybe. And so sometimes it'll be full, sometimes it'll be empty, but you still do that service once a week.
Got it. So even, if we're talking like a McDonald's, do any of those negotiate those types of dumpster things at a corporate level, or is it still you just go to a store manager and have that conversation?
It goes both ways. It really depends because McDonald's, for example, most of those are franchisees.
Mhm.
And so the corporation could have something, hey, we've got to deal with this if you want to do it. But even in that case, most of the franchisees make their own decision. Now they may own 10 or 12 McDonald's in various places, but
Yeah.
yeah.
So what have you found is kind of the most effective way? And we'll talk residential and commercial to acquire these customers and to start that conversation.
Yeah, I would say, and it's really different for both of them. Residential is very much word of mouth. And I would say a great way to do it for residential is to get your employees involved. They see a moving truck, offer some type of finder's fee or something of that sort to your employees because, again, they're in these streets, going down that street once a week. They see somebody out, they're going down, somebody's out in the yard, have some type of little flyer. That's very common. And typically the least costly way to acquire business. And of
Mhm.
course, just give good service because somebody moves in, they're going to ask their neighbor, hey, who do you use if they have to get somebody? Uh, Commercial, it is not uncommon at all for people to have actual sales reps that go out there and sell the service. So they're out there knocking on doors. Again, it depends on how large you want to get, what your geographic area is, or what the manager does. And I think I may have mentioned this before. The sales reps, when we got into the commercial business years ago, we didn't have a sales rep. We grew. I mean, we were adding routes once every 9 months, and it was primarily just word of mouth. We did go hit the state offices, make sure we got on the state bid list on things of that sort, but it was word of mouth. We'd provided good service on the residential side for years, and people heard that, and it's like, hey, yeah, do
Yeah.
this.
Pointed them in your direction. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, so the sales side might be something that, doesn't necessarily mean you have to do it immediately, but as you're thinking about growth and expansion, that might be a model where you're starting to acquire additional customers, especially on the commercial side. So let's talk the last segment. So industrial, does it vary at all? Does the revenue model change from that versus commercial? What should you think about there?
Yeah, the industrial and construction is totally different from not so much how the revenue is. It's not common where it is common to have a monthly service fee for residential and commercial. I mean, that is how it's done. The industrial and construction is more an on demand type service. And so because they are large containers or even, compactors at our own site that do that, it's much more difficult to determine the frequency. And so as they need it, they call. Or on a construction, what's called an open top container where they throw stuff over the top. Everybody's seen those. You don't know. I mean, if they're doing framing, it's going to fill up faster than after the drywall's in, but they've still got to have something there. And so that is how those are done. It really makes a difference whether it's an ongoing business or a temporary work, meaning a construction job. Um, One other thing I will point out that's different, the commercial and residential, you have lots of different customers on that truck when you go to the disposal site. So you have to understand and kind of look at averages, that you use to determine your pricing on that. In the industrial construction side, you are taking all of that waste that you're taking belongs to that particular customer. So it is whatever that cost, you're able to pass that along exactly as to what it is.
Yeah. So do
Uh,
you charge people the disposal cost as a part of the pricing?
well, rarely do you see that unless they are taking it to a site that pays per yard,
Okay.
meaning you have a 30-yard container prices, $10, going to cost $10 a yard, you're going to pay $300. I mean, unless it's fixed, you don't see them, the the transportation and the disposal costs combined.
Got it. So if you're not doing the per yard pricing for industrial, are people mainly just doing a fee for, per week for having the dumpster on site or something like that?
Well, there's several different ways people do this. Some of them on construction sites, they will, here's a price uh, per trip. We're coming out there and the trip plus disposal if it's not a per yard. And then they include the container cost in that. Pros and cons, whether you do that or not. It could be great. And then some of them, here's the monthly container rental, and then there is this price per month price per service. So you pay that in addition to. So it really depends, if you have one that's sitting there for 2 months and you're not, they're not filling it up and it's just sitting there, then not so great. If you figure it in and they're doing it once a week, you're coming out ahead. So it's really kind of understanding, what it is. A big commercial construction job, you'd probably be better, would be to your advantage versus a residential construction job. You're putting putting yourself at risk a little bit.
Yeah. So for these, I assume when you go to pick up one of the dumpsters, you're also leaving an empty one for them to refill, for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends because if you have a consistency in size, you're able to do that. If you're able to do that, that's great because you're not coming back. But it's very possible you're taking that, dumping it, bringing it back, dropping it off, and then going to the next site.
Yeah.
Because if you have one site that has this size, put my hands up for you, and the next site has this size, you can't just
It's not one.
interchange things at the
Right.
site.
Got it. Okay, so there might be a little bit of the logistics of kind of doing the shell shuffle game. But one thing too, in theory, most of the time people are going to call, and that's the time where you go and pick up the full load. Generally, what kind of expectation is there for how quickly you get there? Like, is it built into a contract up front that, when I call, you'll be here in 3 hours, or is it usually like, what kind of leeway do you normally see there?
Yeah, I mean, a whole lot of times what you see is if before 11 or 12, we'll try to get there that day. But look at 24 hours is really what's very common.
Okay. So with that, there's an expectation of kind of how long it'll take you to get there. Does that kind of dictate the farthest that you would ever go to pick up a load? Like, should you think about that? And what kind of radius would you kind of draw there?
Well, it's one where you're located and then where the disposal site is as well, and what your disposal options are. But I mean, most people you can if you have consistency in container size. So if you say, anything 30 miles out or outside, you draw a circle on a map. Outside of this, you can only have this container size. And then that way, if you do that, then you are making sure when you go to get those, you're able to drop one off. So you're not making those 50, 60-mile trips twice. You're only making them once.
Got it. So you can set those parameters and it makes sense. And then that's good advice on, if I'm going to have varying size of containers, I'm going to set a hard limit to how far away it'll be where I vary.
Right.
Um, and the disposal sites, do they typically stay open very late, or are there times where sometimes have you ever had a time where you keep the trash overnight essentially because you had to make a late pickup?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'd like to say you never had that, but the reality is, something comes up and happens with a truck and the site closes prior. I mean, these sites have normal business hours for a lot of them. They tend to open earlier, but they typically don't stay open after 4, 5, 6 in the evening. Um, and so you want to make sure you're starting in time to get there early and do that because, starting your next day, having to go to the site, and if your truck is full, you have to wait for that to happen. It impacts the entire day.
Yeah, I'd imagine so. And I'd also imagine, if you have a facility that you've promised that you're going to keep really clean and store your trucks there, and then you try to store it overnight with a big load of garbage, it's not going to do a lot for your image to the surrounding buildings and facilities.
Right. Although most of it's enclosed, yeah, it definitely has an impact because there could be an odor that comes from it if it's sitting there as well.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, perfect. So I think those are kind of the three models at a high level. Like Tommy said, there are, especially on the commercial and industrial side, there's going to be some variance in the types of revenue, the types of pricing that people offer, and a lot of it's going to come down to what type of structure you're comfortable with for your business, how far out you want to go, the types of service offerings you want to have, and then from there, there's a lot of things to think about, but like I said, as always with this kind of thing, if you're considering a business or have one currently, we're always here to help think through the best way to run these, the best way to price. We can do all of that, even if you're an existing operator, not just trying to get into the space, but if you're just trying to figure out the best way to update your pricing and think about that model in an existing business. Like I said, Tommy's got decades of experience, happy to help with all of that.
Yes.
So I don't see if anyone has any questions, you got about 30 seconds to type them while I finish out. But just, anyone who's on here now or watching later, if you're trying to figure out the next step, One, we always are going to have these webinars, and all of our previous webinars are always going to be on YouTube. So this is going to be a place where you can continue to come learn from Tommy and I about the space, about new things about the space. If there's any new updates, we're always here to talk about it and explain them. We've got a Waste 101 course live on our site that's free to attend, and it's designed to give you kind of a quick overview beyond what we've already talked about in a couple of these webinars. Soon, we will also have a variety of digital courses as well to kind of help you take the next step. But if you're at the point where either you're actively considering one of these or you're already a contractor trying to find the best way to operate efficiently, we have programs where you can work directly with both our team and with Tommy on how to run your business most effectively, how to be successful leading up to takeover and after takeover. So if you have questions on any of that, reach out to our team. Again, the easiest way is always info@routeconsultant.com. And if you just mention what your question is, we'll get you to the right place. Other than that, though, I'm not seeing any new questions come in. So, Tommy, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for kind of giving up your time for everybody and answering everybody's questions in mine.